Hello everyone, my name is Grayson and this is my first Age of Wonders 4 deep dive where I'm going to be going into a little bit of depth into a concept, something that I find interesting. This first one I'm going to be doing is about tier 3 shield units, and you might be thinking, boy, that's really specific, and you'd be right, because that's what I want to make a video on. So with all that being said, let's get into the video, and I want to show you guys the tier 3 shield units and the ups and downs of each one. So let's get into it. The first unit we're going to talk about is the Industrious Culture's Bastion. This is a tier 3 shield unit, and we're going to just take a quick rundown of its statistics and then show off some of the more cool powers it has, and then we're going to compare those to what the other units can offer. So this unit has 100 health starting, which is a pretty good number. 7 defense is very good. 2 resistance is not as great, but this is a shield unit, not a support unit, so its job is typically for frontline defense, not frontline resistance. It has 32 movement, which is the standard amount. It has 3 status effect resistance natively, and it has land movement. It has optional cavalry, which is a trait you can take for your race when you're designing them, and it has shield unit, so this is good against physical attacks and physical damage and can protect allies around it. It is a repeating 12 damage melee strike. Next up are its defense options. A standard unit going into defense mode will gain 2 resistance and 2 defense. This is good for all units in case you expect them to be attacked. That's about a 19% reduction in damage depending on their current status. However, a shield unit projects an aura around it that protects its allies. Now, this is known as the shield wall. So you can see here it extends its zone of control, gets +2 defense and resistance, and is immune to flanking. That's a normal defensive maneuver. But a shield unit will also give all friendly units 3 defense. The Bastion unit goes a little further with this by having inspiring defense. This will not only be able to allow it to use its defense mode shield wall to protect itself and others, but it will actually give out 1 point of defense, so the armor, to itself and adjacent units, and that will last 3 turns, and that can stack up to 5 times. So this unit is a real solid wall of defense that you can put in front of your troops and between your ranged troops and the enemy's troops. So this unit is fantastic at blocking physical damage. It has 100 health and 7 armor, which quickly becomes 10 when you factor in these bonuses from defense. This unit does not go down easy to physical attacks. It also has defensive masters. This unit will always enter defense mode at the end of its turn, which is an amazing power. It also has shield defense. Some of its defense is only present when it's not being flanked. So remember, if it's not in defense mode, which extends its zone of control in all directions, it can be flanked and be considered to have 3 less defense. So do watch out about turning your backs to enemies with these bastions. It also has Watchful, which gives it a bonus retaliation attack. This is typical for higher tier units, just to make them a little bit more of a, have more staying power in a fight when they're designed to be up in the faces of the enemy units. The second of 3 tier 3 shield units we're going to be taking a look at is the Iron Golem, one of my personal favorites. So this unit boasts a very similar defensive amount of stats. It's got 95 health. For some reason, it's 5 health lower. It has 7 armor and 2 resistance and 32 movement. This is extremely similar to the Bastion. It's just missing 5 health. It has the native 3 status effect resistance, but this unit comes with 6 blight resistance and -4 lightning resistance. So be very careful about going up against, say, astral units with lightning attacks, chain lightning. Watch out for that because it will rip through this unit. -4 to this, that's -2 resistance, which is going to be about 19% extra damage that they take just right off the health. So they will have trouble against that kind of thing. They have a repeating 14 damage melee strike. For some reason, they get a couple more damage than the Bastion. They have defense mode protective wall. Now, this is stronger than a regular defense mode of something like a Bastion or another shield unit because this also projects 3 status resistance. This is a rare ability for a shield unit. They not only give out the 3 defense, but also the 3 status resistance. An Iron Golem in the front lines in defense mode will make everything around it hard to kill. They have the standard shield defense, which blocks extra damage when they're not being flanked. They have Siege Breaker. When this unit is part of a sieging army, it gets +1 fortification damage against the city that you're sieging. Basically a useless ability if you don't have at least 3 of these guys. Iron Golems have status effect immunity and morale immunity. This is extremely important for them. This means that if you are going up against particularly the undead, who are going to be trying to set decaying on you and sapping your morale, this unit will stay in the fight essentially forever. It will never give up if your units are routing. It will never give up from morale draining attacks from, say, the undead. It will keep fighting until it dies. It's a great unit for that. On the other side, it cannot gain morale bonuses. So if you are winning or you have some sort of ability that will enhance their morale to make them fight harder, they do not get that bonus. This unit is considered an elemental, which also makes it immune to bleeding, poisoned, and diseased. Poisoned and bleeding are fairly common status effects. The only one I would say is more common than that is probably burning. And diseased is not as common, but it can certainly be a huge issue, especially when it gives you minus resistance, and this unit does struggle a little bit with that if it's not in defense mode. They hit decently hard for a shield unit, and the sound effect they make when they beat things is amazing. Definitely use these if you haven't already. The third of 3 units we're going to be discussing is the Entwined Protector, an unusual shield unit to be sure. It has 100 health, 7 armor, it has 1 more resistance for some reason, and the standard movement. It has the native 3 resistance to status effects. It has -2 to blight, +2 to shock, -4 to fire. Now this will hit hard. Again, if they're not in defense mode, this gives them a negative resistance to fire, so they will actually take about 10% more damage from fire attacks, so be very careful of that. You can see that these defenses here make this unit kind of a foil to the Iron Golem's purpose. The Iron Golem wants to be fighting against blight and not shock. This unit is the opposite. Do not go up against blight and fire with the Entwined Protector. It has a repeating 13 damage melee strike, 1 more than the Bastion, 1 less than the Iron Golem. It has an unusual ability for going into defense mode called Healing Sap. This targets itself and all friendly adjacent units for 20 temporary hit points and then puts it into defense mode. So this is an ability you can use at the beginning of a fight if you need to top your units off because they're already damaged, or in the middle of a fight when you've got a bunch of units that have been taking some damage, you can run this guy in even behind your other units, go into defense mode, heal your units, and provide them with that extra defense. So they can kind of double as a support unit, which is quite interesting. They can't give you any resistance at all. So again, these are purely for tanking physical damage and also a little bit of healing. They have the defense mode shield wall, identical to almost all other shield units. It just gives out the friendly unit defense, but of course it does buff itself with defense and resistance. And it has the shield defense. Once again, it is vulnerable to flanking attacks a little bit. So you can see the Entwined Protector is a little bit weaker overall than the other 2 units. And I think the reason for that is because it is a summoned unit. This unit can be brought into battle way away from your cities where the fights are taking place. It can get there quickly. So I think they made sure it didn't have too many cool powers because it was easy to get it on the front lines. The Golems and Bastions, however, do need to be built in a city and sent there. So it does take a little while longer to get them to the front lines. So you're probably thinking, Gracian, wait a second, there's a 4th tier 3 shield unit, and I didn't forget the Blessed Soul. However, you can guarantee that you get a Bastion, an Iron Golem, or an Entwined Protector based on how you built your faction. A Blessed Soul is not so easy. These are much more rare to acquire, so I'm not going to be discussing these as an option. As a side note, I do think that these are slightly more powerful than the other units we've been discussing, but you'll have to check those out for yourself. As you can see here, I have a side-by-side of the 3 unit cards, so you can get a quick look at their different abilities and stats at a glance. And I have also made this spreadsheet bit here comparing their stats with a little bit more detail. You can see where I've discussed things like exactly what this ability does, exactly what this ability does. So which of these 3 tier 3 shield units is the best? Well, it does largely depend on circumstance. Let's actually go right to left here. The Entwined Protector does have 1 extra point of resistance and it can be summoned onto the map. It can also heal allies, which is an unusual ability for a defensive troop like a shield unit, but overall, in my opinion, the Entwined Protector is the worst of the three. The Iron Golem is immune to a lot of really important game concepts like morale, status effects, and several types of damage over time. It also hits a little bit harder than the other two, making it a decent fighter if it has some enchantments on it as well. But overall, I would say the Bastion is the best of these three units, for the simple reason that there's one very important thing missing from this unit card: racial abilities and racial transformations. For instance, if you have a Lizardman Bastion, enemies will poison themselves by attacking it. Or let's say you have a Tome of Dragons and you're casting racial transformations to make them draconian. They will gain health and regeneration. You cannot put that on Iron Golems and Entwined Protectors, or even those Blessed Souls that we're not talking about. Bastion units are, in my opinion, far and away the best option if you do not know exactly what you need. I think that Iron Golems have a very solid place in this, and Entwined Protectors are a nice third option, especially if you're going down the nature route. You may be lacking in some tanky frontline units. Alright everybody, this has been a lot of fun making this video. If you have any suggestions for another deep dive, please let me know. I'd be happy to do it. I had a lot of fun researching their abilities, comparing and contrasting them, and even trying them out in fights to see what they felt like to use. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this, especially if you want to see some Let's Plays of Age of Wonders 4 or all sorts of other random games that I do. I really appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next one.